communications, right? And we also know that when we come up with dia punya marketing communications, we can actually design the campaign to actually do different things, whether kita nak create awareness or we want to create knowledge, liking, preference, and so on and so forth. As you actually see here, we will use different sort of tactics to actually try to entice the consumer to remember our brand and also choose our brand. Okay, so from there you can see that for marketing management, when we talk about managing their punya marketing communications, this is basically their punya process to actually come up with their punya communication punya program, right? And then we actually went through to look at what are all the important things that we need to consider when we actually want to come up with the marketing punya programming. Okay, so in line with that, you will see that we actually went on to talk about quite a number of things until we actually stopped at slide 20 and also 21. And you will see that we've already reached this thing called coming up with your punya media plan. So media plan basically here is what is all the media that we want to use for our marketing communications. And we have to consider dia punya timing dan juga dia punya allocation. So how much money you want to spend for that particular period of time, for that campaign you want to run. Those are the things that we actually need to choose. Okay, so in connection to that, you will see that we actually have 4 strategies when we want to launch a new punya product. So these 4 strategies actually corresponds with when we actually want to do kita punya marketing communications, what sort of pattern do we actually want to use? Okay, kita nak gunakan pattern macam mana? And the pattern here talks about whether we want to consistently and continuously expose our brand or we want to use other types of methods. Okay, so when we look at these 4 strategies, you'll see that the first one is continuity, second concentration, third one fighting, and last one is pulsing. So what does this actually mean? So that means that when we actually push out kita punya marketing communications, we can actually set dia punya timing. And when we set this timing, we can follow different strategies. We can follow the continuity punya strategy. Continuity punya strategy means that we consistently make sure that our marketing communication is exposed to their punya target market. So that means that, for example, McDonald's, for example, or KFC might actually choose to continuously expose their punya brand. So, for example, the other marketing communications every month. So every month you janji, you will see McDonald's or KFC, they will come up with some sort of marketing communications and they will continue this for as long as they are around. Every year when they decide, they might actually continue, they might actually choose to use this strategy to make sure that every month ada some sort of markom punya message keluar daripada mereka. Okay, so that's the first strategy, which is continuity. Alright, then kita juga ada concentration. Concentration mean that all the advertising punya duit that they ada ataupun all the marketing communications punya budget that they have, they only spend in a single period. Okay, satu period sahaja. Tapi dia akan pilih period mana yang sesuai untuk business dia. So naturally this would mean that if this is a type of company that they only have business at a certain period of time, then it's suitable for them to actually choose this. So for example, if I run a skiing resort, so to ski I need snow. So if I need snow, that means that I can only run my skiing resort during winter. And winter is maybe 3-4 months long. Okay, so that means that all my advertising dollars or communication dollars, I only put right before skiing, right before winter, and during winter only. So for maybe all my money only goes to that particular period only. Because in the other periods, there's no snow and my winter resort is actually not open, or my skiing resort is actually not open. So it has to, this choice of this strategy has to correlate back to what type of business do they run. So if that business is so happen, it only runs during winter, okay, then it's suitable that they actually run dia punya concentration punya call. Okay. Another example I can give you is maybe there are some businesses dekat Malaysia that only run during bulan Ramadan. The other months tak ada. It's only bulan Ramadan. So for example, maybe I am a Pasar Ramadan punya organizer. So for Pasar Ramadan, I can only do it during that 1 month, during Ramadan. So then I make sure that semua saya punya communication dollars, I only keep for that single period because I do not plan to do marketing communications at other points of time. It doesn't make sense to my business, so I won't do it. Okay, so that's concentration. Okay, then kita ada flighting. So when you think about flighting, you can think about how a bird actually jumps from one place to another, one jumps from one place to another, to another, to another. Okay, because the word flighting here will mean that there is communication for one period, and then after that dia diam, no communication. Then after that dia ada communication balik. So that means dia ada macam selang-seli ataupun dia macam cik semua, kejap ada kejap tak ada. Alright. So kalau dia kejap ada kejap tak ada, that is actually known as flighting. Alright. So if it makes sense to my business to actually do flighting, or if my budget is only so much that I can only do sometimes ada, sometimes tak ada, sometimes ada, sometimes tak ada, then I will choose this way of uh, of reaching out to my consumers ataupun this way to manage saya punya marketing communications. Okay. Then kita ada pulsing. Okay. So for pulsing, you'll see that it's a combination of continuous communication and then reinforce punya periodic punya behavior activity. That means that there is an underlying punya continuous communication, and then after that, at certain points, suddenly dia banyak. Okay, at certain points, suddenly dia banyak, right? So that is known as pulsing. So pulsing, again, you will see if it is a business that actually faces a lot of competition, then maybe what they need to do is that they understand that throughout the year, they will have competitors that will compete with them, drop their price, have new promotions, and so on. So they know that they have to actually manage that sort of competition. So you see that maybe they have one baseline of what is their punya continuous punya communication that's tied back to a certain value of money. And then they also have some money for some promotions which are important to them, or promotions which they already know they have to run at a certain point of the year. They have to keep on running those promotions. Okay, so if that is their punya nature of business and also how they communicate, then they can actually go for pulsing. So you can see here, when they actually come up with their punya strategies for their punya media plan, it depends on how much money they have, how many competitors they actually have in the marketplace, what does the competitor actually do, and also it depends on dia punya jenis produk ataupun service. So for each type of product ataupun service, dia ada behavior yang berlainan. Kena faham dulu, they have to first understand what is the nature of their punya business, how the actually come up with their punya strategies. Okay. All right. Then we go on to trying to see the difference between what is a national buy, spot buy, dan juga local buy. Okay. So when we have a media plan, what we're doing is that we're actually buying spaces. And these spaces could be spaces for kita punya magazine, it could be spaces for kita punya radio ad, spaces for TV ad, spaces for online ad, or even spaces for things like magazine and so on. And so here, when we want to buy all these spots or all these advertisement spaces, we can actually choose to buy them based on national punya buy. So if you're saying national punya buy, that means that that advertisement or that piece of marketing communication will go out to the entire country. And if it goes out to the entire country, that means that the provider of that particular service must be some sort of a national TV ataupun a national radio punya network. It must have coverage for the entirety of the nation. Then it can actually offer national level punya advertising punya products. So here, if I am a business, I will decide whether my targets are actually linked to this national punya buys ataupun tidak. So if I'm a big brand like KFC, I know that my target market is available across the country, then I can buy a national buy. The national buy makes sense to me. I can advertise on the whole RTM punya network. Okay? As opposed to that, kita ada spot buys. So spot buys will be more limited. National will be the big one. Spot buys will be more limited, where you will see that we will target only a few markets, or for example, a selected number of vehicles untuk exposure. For example, kita guna magazine, and for magazine, bit to, and we already know that we are only going for a subset of the larger punya market. So this one also, when we choose, we will actually choose according to who is the target market that we're trying to reach. And so if we target it correctly, you will see that that choice of these spot buys might actually have a very dominant punya influence. So for example, let's say I have a IKEA, and IKEA is actually opening in Batu Kawan. There's already one in Batu Kawan. Batu Kawan is in Penang. Okay, so if I'm opening IKEA in Penang, then you can already see that spot buys would make sense to me, because I will then maybe go and look for programming or magazines that focus on people in Penang to actually inform them that IKEA is actually already open there, and they can actually go to IKEA in Penang. They don't have to come all the way to KL. All right. So that would be example of dia punya spot buy. Okay. And then we can go on to dia punya local punya buy. So local punya buy will be good for businesses which are in only a certain area. So for example, if we have businesses that are only limited to Puncak Alam, for example, then they have to go and look for opportunities where they can push out their punya marketing communication only in that particular local punya area. So this one, they have to go and source. And usually when they source, they can also ask the media planner to recommend. Usually media planner has got a lot under their portfolio. They've got links to all sorts of magazines, TVs, radios, whatever it is, dia memang ada. And then kita pergi sana dan kita pilih, okay, what is it that we actually want for kita punya business, which is the marketing communication that's suitable untuk campaign yang kita nak buat, right? So that is part and parcel of kita punya media plan, where we can actually choose, kita boleh pilih according to budget yang kita ada, and also the particular campaign yang kita nak buat, what is actually suitable untuk kita punya organisation. Okay. Right, so let's go on to the next one. So here we move away from media plan, and we try to understand what are the message appeals that we can actually design. Okay, so there are two big ones. One is informational appeal, and the other one is actually transformational appeal. Okay, kalau informational appeal, the hint is already inside dia punya nama, where you see that here, what we need to give is, we need to give information to the consumer. And typically when we give the information to the consumer, that means that in some sort of logic, where we are making an argument, we will highlight dia punya product punya attribute ataupun benefit. And we highlight dia punya attribute dan benefit because this is what the consumer is looking for. So if we already do our targeting, we already know what is the consumer looking for, we can outright go out and do our marketing communications to actually communicate the attribute dan juga benefit. Okay. So when we use informational appeal, kita ada dua cara. One is one-sided punya argument, and the other one is two-sided punya argument. That means that kita kena logically present some information, and then after that, the consumer will evaluate based on the information that's actually given. Okay, so if they are going for one-sided punya argument, they will highlight the key or most important punya attribute dahulu, ataupun the key and most important punya benefit dahulu. Okay, kalau one-sided argument. So for example, if you have medicine, ubat, saya jual ubat, alright. If I have medicine and I'm trying to sell ubat, I will say that the attribute of my ubat is that I will actually, it's very impactful, and for example, it's very impactful and I will take away your headache in 5 minutes. Sebab I nak jual ubat tu, I have to say what is the attribute or the benefit that you are going to get. So the benefit that I want, if I'm somebody who's sick, is that I don't want to be sick anymore. And perhaps I can, with the formula that I have for that particular medicine, I can actually take away that sickness ataupun that situation very quickly. So if it's a one-sided argument, terus I cakap benefit apa you dapat. So I'll say that the medicine will take away your headache in 5 minutes, for example. Okay. Kalau two-sided punya argument, I will present two ideas. The first idea, I will try to agree with the consumer first. The second idea, I will make the argument for the benefit that I want to give. Okay, so for two-sided arguments, there are two different ideas or two different arguments. And the first argument, I will agree first with the consumer. And then the second argument, I will then go on to the benefit that I want to communicate to the consumer. So for example, untuk two-sided argument ni, for a medicine, perhaps I will tackle the perception of the consumer first, which is the medicine tastes really bad. So maybe it's very bitter ataupun dia punya flavor is just very bad lah. Okay. So consumers might avoid that particular medicine because it tastes so bad that the consumers rasa tak best lah, dia punya flavor teruk. Okay. But the thing is, for my medicine, although it doesn't taste pleasant, it does its job. So it can take the sickness away, or it can solve the problem of sakit kerongkong ke, ataupun batuk ke, whatever it is that the patient is going through, it can take away all their problems. So when I make this two-sided argument, I might begin with, yes, it's really bitter. And then I go on to the second argument, which is, but it works under 5 minutes. Right? Initially, I will start with, I agree with the consumer. Consumer think that, oh, it tastes really, really bad. Then after that, I will go to the argument where I tell the consumer what is the benefit. Okay. So for this particular type of appeal, what we're using is we're using arguments. So we have to use a logic, and we have to appeal to the consumer punya logic. Okay, and the decision to use this depends on the category of products that we are actually selling, product ataupun service lah. So if that product or service requires argument in terms of logic punya flow of information, then you'll see that the company ataupun the manufacturer will choose to use informational punya appeal because it makes sense in the minds of the consumer, and it might appeal to the consumer when they actually break down your punya logic. Okay. The second one that we have is transformational punya appeal. So when we talk about transformational appeal, you'll see that this type of marketing communication actually looks at non-product related benefit or the image. Okay, so it's not product related punya benefit. We are not communicating dia punya benefit, right? And typically when we use transformational punya appeal, it usually makes them feel something. So when we put the whole message together and we present the message to the consumer, you akan rasa dia akan you akan nampak bahawa dia akan rasa sesuatu, and that emotion is what will actually motivate them to go and do something. Right? So this one is logic. Okay, this attractive. Okay, so here when we actually use this transformational punya appeal, you will see that we can actually use things like fears of smoking, or can also use dia punya negative punya association. For example, if you want to stop people from taking drugs, you might actually highlight the negative effects of drugs. Okay, so out of fear or out of concern of the fear of being shunned by society, for example, they will feel that fear, and then maybe it will stop them from thinking or even to smoke. Okay, other than the negative emotions, we can also use positive emotions or humor to make the audience feel a certain way, and then hopefully they will think positively about our brand and then go out to buy our brand. And you'll see in Malaysia, we frequently use humor. Memang kita ada banyak influencer, kita ada banyak ataupun banyak advertisement dekat YouTube dan mana-mana sahaja, that you see that humor actually remember that brand from the way it actually makes you feel. Okay, so if it makes you feel something, you're looking at marketing communication punya message and it makes you feel something, remember that's known as a transformational punya appeal. All right, okay, then we go on to selecting their punya message source. So this is the person that actually sends out the message. And when we select their punya message source, it can be a series of people who might have expertise, trustworthiness, ataupun likability. Contributes to the source punya credibility. If then this be the source of the information for a toothpaste ataupun that means that dentist actually represents that expertise and known as people and so when certain toothpaste actually work, a certain mouthwash really works, you'll see that they are communicating a level of confidence to the consumer. And then we also have trustworthiness is whether that particular source is, and typically we'll think that people who are not paid to actually come up with people who are not paid to come up with some sort of marketing communication, or people who are not paid to champion certain brands are seen as more trustworthy. Also, people that we think or we perceive to be honest are also seen to be more trustworthy. Okay, so that means that when we actually do PR exercise is when we take our product and we give it to people to actually try. And usually these people that we give our products to ask and expertise. YouTube, you will see that there are a lot of people who are actually reviewing things like mobile phone, people who review clothes, people who review cars and so on. So when they actually go out and review and they are not paid for it, okay, tinggi. Rather are paid to them because they have some sort of expertise or likability, but mungkin trustworthiness lebih kurang. Okay, it's less. Okay, then we also have like refers to the source punya attractiveness, and this attractiveness can come from a lot of things. It can come from dia punya looks, It can come from dia punya personality. Maybe this person is really very funny, ataupun personality that we actually like. So the more we like that person, the more that person is seen to be attractive to us. Okay. So here, these are the decisions that the marketing department has to make. Because for the marketing department, if they actually have money to pay and they're designing a campaign, then they might actually use message source, and they might actually need to choose some sort of personality, actress, ambassador for their punya campaign. So when they choose this sort of campaign, you'll see that they will actually pay attention to their punya source punya credibility. Okay, which is also why when there are controversies, okay, when there are controversies, typically that artis ataupun that influencer punya likability akan turun. So when dia punya likability turun sebab there's some bad news about dia ataupun negative punya gossip about dia, you see that that source punya attractiveness akan turun, and some brands actually drop them. Okay, sebab controversy never good for dia punya likability. Right? So the thing is that if we actually choose kita punya influencer ataupun kita punya artis to help us promote kita punya product, okay, if the consumer actually has a positive attitude towards both the message and also the source, then they will walk away with a favorable punya impression of that brand. So that means that you like Bella, and at the same time, you also like Kitsui punya products. Okay, so I'm just going to blow this out a bit so you can look at what is Kitsui punya products. So if you like Bella and you like Kitsui punya products, then you don't see any problem when Bella actually promotes these products, because you're like, oh yeah, memang bagus. Okay, produk ni memang bagus. I memang guna produk ni, tak ada masalah langsung. So it's congruent. Okay, this feeling is congruent ataupun dia selari dengan persepsi kita. But if let's say we like Bella, okay, but we don't like Kitsui. Okay, we think that maybe Kitsui is brand yang merapu ataupun produk dia tak bagus ataupun for whatever reason it is, we just don't like Kitsui. So if we like Bella but we don't like Kitsui, right? Then you will actually see that what will happen is we will lose some esteem ataupun persepsi kita terhadap Bella akan menjadi sedikit buruk. Okay, so you see that we will lose either some respect ataupun some trust in Bella because she's promoting a product that we don't believe in. Okay, so that's the danger when we actually go out and we choose their punya source. Typically, what the company will do is they will choose a influencer or artist or some sort of key opinion leader that they think will actually appeal to their punya target market. If it doesn't appeal to their punya target market, they will not likely choose that person. And also when influencers choose the brands that they support, they will also try to support the brands that they think their fan base will actually like or can accept. All right. Okay. Then we go on to developing a creative brief. Okay. So if you still remember, when we talk about marketing communications, typically what the marketer needs to come up with is the marketer actually needs to come up with a brief to actually brief dia punya advertising agency ataupun brief dia punya marketing services provider to actually come up with dia punya creatives, right? So here, when we talk about coming up with dia punya creative brief, we can use this particular framework dekat sini. And this framework, actually, if you actually look at the letters dekat sini, stands for all this, right? And here, what you need to pay attention to is that what we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that we can do all, if not some of this. Alright, so we expect that when we run marketing communications, kita dah bayar duit, kita dah execute dan sebagainya, that we can actually hold the attention of the consumers. So the consumers, we have to give the consumers something that the consumers actually want to watch. And we hope that when we push out kita punya marketing communication punya messages, because we spend money, that they will actually pay attention. So you typically see when they come up with creative, they try to be the execution is something that they think might appeal to their punya target market, and they will try to make themselves distinguish from other adverts because they want to stand out. So dia kena unik, barulah orang akan ingat dan orang akan pay attention. So that means that they cannot just in some scenarios, they cannot just recycle the old ideas, because the recycle the old ideas, people can already guess what is the content that's going to come out already. All right. So for some type of campaigns, dia memang kena cuba untuk distinguish themselves from other adverts. And then you also see that dia akan communicate dia punya positioning. So this is where dia akan come up with dia punya benefits and attributes. So they will communicate that in that particular marketing communications punya campaign. And they will hope that people can actually remember dia punya advert, because later on dia akan measure dia punya brand recall, apa you ingat, apa perasaan anda dan sebagainya. And so when we talk about apakah perasaan anda, that is known as amplification. So amplification is after somebody or a group of consumers have already watched it, we are hoping that what they have is positive emotion. We don't want negative punya emotion. But we know in reality memang ada some marketing communications dia tak jadi. So you see that people actually have a negative punya take on that particular punya advertisement. So when we amplify, okay, when we amplify ataupun ada amplification, we are hoping that that is a positive punya application, because typically all brands want dia punya target consumer to suka dia ataupun have a very favorable punya impression of dia. Okay, and then we also have to consider down here whether dia punya marketing communications punya campaign ataupun that advertisement itself, dia boleh fit dengan any established punya associations ataupun tidak. Because if a brand has been around for a long time, typically they already have painted a picture in the minds of the consumer. Consumer sudah ada perception. So for example, kalau saya kata McDonald's ataupun saya kata KFC ataupun saya kata Pizza Hut, you already have an impression inside your brand, because these are brands that you've used before. You pernah makan barang dia, you pernah tengok dia punya advertisements, you've seen the type of campaigns that they've already run. So you dah ada certain type of perception, established associations, perception dalam your own mind. Okay, so they also want to make sure that the marketing communication that goes out fits with dia punya brand punya established punya association. So this is why you akan nampak that when we talk about branding, branding usually they will control dia punya brand. So that brand will stand for certain things, certain values, use certain type of color. The product needs to be shown in a certain type of light, and they try to control all this when they execute dia punya ad ataupun dia punya creative. They want to make sure that all these things are consistent, because they know that consumers, especially if it's not a new brand, consumers already have a perception. So they kena maintain that perception dalam minda, what do you call it? Minda of the consumer. Okay. So remember, this is what happens when we actually develop dia punya creative brief. Turns out there are actually a lot of things that we need to think about dalam marketing when we're coming up with marketing communication and also advertising yang kita nak guna. Alright. Okay. So now we go on to what we have to pay attention to after the advertisement already goes out ataupun after the marketing communications already goes out. Okay, so there are two logic dekat sini ataupun two approaches dekat sini. One is the supply side, okay, and the other one is the demand side. Okay, so what happens here? What happens here is that if kita nak tengok dia punya supply side, what we're trying to do is we're trying to measure ataupun assess the media punya coverage. Okay, so for the money that we pay for, how much coverage do we get? So typically when we want to measure dia punya coverage, we actually start to measure things like the number of seconds the brand is visible. So if you run a advertising punya campaign and in the form of video, kita akan kira the number of seconds that the brand was actually shown. Okay? Ataupun kalau kita run an advertisement di dalam some sort of magazine ataupun newspaper, the hard copy one, then this has been a common practice dah lama ni. We actually measure dia punya inches. That means dia punya size of dia punya ad. Kita usually akan measure benda ni. And that will actually quantify dia punya media punya coverage. So we will say that, oh, okay, we got how many seconds in the last campaign, we have how many seconds on YouTube, or we had how many seconds on RTM, or we had how many seconds exposure di dalam media yang kita pilih. Ataupun last month kita ada how many inches of exposure di dalam sesuatu magazine ataupun a newspaper. Okay, so this approach is not a new approach lah. It's a very old approach, and you can see that the way dia quantify dia punya measurement is like, for example, seconds, and also dia punya inches ataupun dia punya cm is basically dia manually go and measure. Okay, kita dapat space dia berapa. Okay, and we'll try to understand kenapa dia nak measure semua ni, buat apa, right? Buat apa dia nak buat semua ni. So that's why we will go on to the next side, which is dia punya demand side. So demand side, we're trying to assess whether campaign ni dia ada effect ke tak ada. Okay, campaign ni ada effect ke ataupun tiada. And of course, when we look at the effect, we will look at dia punya target audience. So in regards to the target audience, what we want to know is whether the target audience, as you've heard many times before, can actually recall the message or not. Can the target audience tell me how many times they saw the message? Can the target audience tell me how they felt when they saw the message? Can the target audience, you can see here, change dia punya attitude towards product saya selepas dia nampak marketing communication saya? So you see here ialah dia punya impact. So we already put out dia punya advertising. We put out the advertising. And then here we want to know what is the impact. What is the effect on kita punya target audience. Okay. So you can see here what they're trying to do is they're trying to compare. Kita bayar semua ni, kita letak di semua tempat ni. Adakah tempat ni betul? Adakah messaging dia betul? Adakah message dia resonate dengan dia punya target market? So if it resonates with the target market, that means that the target market actually consume the message and then creates a favorable impression in the minds of the consumer, then we continue doing that lah, because that actually works untuk kita punya target market. Tetapi if we do kita punya measurement and kita found out that, oh, the consumer didn't even see the message, or they saw it once and then they were like, I tak nak tengok benda ni, then we know already, oh, okay, this is not effective punya advertising campaign, ataupun this is not effective punya marketing communication if the message just falls on deaf ears. Okay, so the connection between these two is that here they try to quantify untuk duit yang dia bayar, apa dia dapat in terms of dia punya space and in terms of dia punya saat. Because at the end of the day, they want to know whether is it effective or not. Berapa saat yang dia guna, dekat slot mana, dekat magazine mana dia dapat berapa inci, is it actually effective or not? So if it's effective, we continue. If it's not effective, that means we have to change. Okay. Then we break down sedikit lagi. We go one more step to actually look at this diagram here. So inside this diagram, you can see that kita ada share of expenditure, share of voice, share of mind and heart, and also share of market. So typically what the company wants is dia spend duit, okay, dia spend duit, dan bila dia spend duit tu dia boleh mempengaruhi dia punya customer, and customer then akan beli barang dia. Bila customer beli barang dia, dia dapat certain market share, right? So here what they are trying to do through this process is that they will look at their company and evaluate how much do they actually spend for marketing communications, right? And then from the amount of money that they spend within their punya marketplace, okay, within their punya marketplace, when they compare with all their competitors, how much share of the voice do they have? That means that do they actually stand out from other brands or not? Or maybe their punya marketing communication actually just is drowned by other brands. So there are so many brands out there, they don't stand out at all. So if they don't stand out at all, then how do they expect to actually gather the attention of their punya consumer? Tak mungkin kan, right? So that means that only the messages that really stand out kepada dia punya target market will actually influence the consumer. The consumer will be able to recall dia punya brand, dan the consumer mungkin akan pilih brand itu. So if the consumer repeatedly pilih brand tu, that's known as loyalty kan, betul tak? If we continuously choose only that one brand, that means that the consumer is exhibiting loyalty towards that brand, which is dia punya share of heart, continuously choosing to use that particular brand punya barang. Okay, so if we have the consumers that can recall the brand and will choose the brand, then that would be great, because that would mean that we will get a certain market share of the users out there. And most companies, of course, they want to be the market leader. And to be the market leader, you will have to have the largest market share ataupun bilangan pengguna yang paling banyak. And typically, you will see that untuk any brands typically like being popular. Because if they are popular, then there is a very high likelihood that consumers are choosing them, consumers like them, and consumers will actually continue to use them. Okay, so if we have that, and we have that over a long period of time, that means that that company might actually make a lot of sales and also be very, very profitable at the end, because they can generate their punya income from the repeated punya sales that they actually continuously get from their punya consumer. Okay, so it's interlinked to each other. And marketing communication is no small feat. It's not small feat. It's not so easy to, sometimes it's not easy to actually stand out dalam dia punya noise ataupun dia punya clutter, especially if the brand actually have a lot of competitors. Then you'll see that mungkin dia punya expenditure, the amount of money that they pump into marketing communications perlu tinggi, sebab dia ada banyak competitor and dia kena come up with very creative punya campaign to actually stand out from dia punya competitor. Okay, so from all this, I hope that you can see the connection between marketing communications, why we do marketing communications, and also what we actually hope to gain from it at the end of the day. And I also hope that from all this, you memang boleh nampak dia punya kesesuaian of each step of the way. Actually, when we manage kita punya marketing communication punya process, we actually have to think very carefully apa kita nak buat dan how to actually appeal to kita punya target market, right? So at each step kita kena deliberate what is actually suitable for my company, for my target market at that point of time. Apa yang I nak promote tu, dia kena basically hits the bullseye lah. So if you don't hit the bullseye, that's when you will see that, okay, we admit we didn't hit the bullseye this time. We need to actually change the punya marketing communications punya program. So kita akan continue to olah until we actually get it correct. Okay. So that's the end of this chapter, which is marketing communications. Before I go to the next set of slides, do you have any questions about marketing communications? Okay, so Firdaus say semua okay, tak ada soalan. Sebagai wakil kepada the other people in this class. Okay, so before we go to the next set of slide, I'm going to propose we take a 5-minute break. Kita rehat 5 minit and you come back after 5 minutes. Okay, see y'all in 5 minutes. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's begin again. So before I go into the next chapter, I just nak highlight dekat sini. Alright, I just like to highlight here, this is actually dia punya course outline. And I'm sure most of you have heard that there are some changes. You would have heard last week also that there are some changes. So I'm just going to highlight to all of you, right? So you're aware already. Yeah? I just like to highlight to all of you that you punya assignment 1, 2, 3, dia punya passing mark is 50 out of 100. Okay, which you can actually see here. So if you get 48, that means you fail. All right, you fail. So you have to make sure that all your components, semua component ni adalah 50 untuk assignment 1, 2, 3. Alright. And then kita juga ada test kan. And for your test, that is known as dia punya final assessment. Final assessment, dia punya passing mark is 20 out of 100. So if you get 18, that means you fail. If you get 20 cukup-cukup ataupun 21, that means you pass already. Okay, so to pass this subject, you have to make sure that you maintain 50, 50, 50 or 100 dan juga 20 or 100, then it's considered a pass. If for any reason, any of these components you tak lepas, that means you actually have to repeat the subject next semester. Okay, so this is the same untuk any of your other subjects also. You will see that the changes would have been announced already lah. Okay, so just pay attention to make sure that you punya assignment semua lepas dan juga you punya test you actually study. So make sure you don't repeat this subject in the next semester. Okay, tidak digalakkan. Alright, so now let's go on to kita punya next chapter. So next chapter kita ialah distribution channels. Okay, we're looking at distribution channels. And so let's begin. Okay, so as a refresher, most of you already know what is distribution channel. And you also even understand the roles of distribution channel. Okay, but just as a refresher, you'll see that distribution channel is defined as a whole series of organizations that actually make the product or service available to the consumer. Okay, so you can imagine that we might actually have a lot of intermediaries that actually help us to connect that particular manufacturer punya product kepada consumer. Okay, so in when we're trying to understand intermediaries, there are generally three big groups of intermediaries. We start with the first one, which is merchants. So merchant is very much a description for a retailer where for a retailer to actually function, dia kena beli barang tu. Okay, whatever the manufacturer is making, they will buy. And then you'll see that when they buy, they actually own the merchandise ataupun they own the item. And they will take the merchandise and they will sell them to consumers. So that, as most of you know, when I say intermediaries, a lot of times you will imagine this particular function where we can imagine very clearly what is a retailer, what is a wholesaler. We all understand what this functionality actually is. So the appropriate term untuk that particular type of intermediary is actually a merchant. So that is a change of title. The ownership of the barang actually goes to dia punya wholesaler ataupun retailer and then they jual. Then we also have agents. So agents, they actually don't own the barang. Okay, they do not own the barang. What they do is that they will negotiate on the manufacturer's behalf. So for example, if the manufacturer actually has a sales team, then you see that the sales team will actually go out, then you negotiate the barang, and then after that, the sale will be actually made. So here, the intermediary that actually goes to negotiate doesn't own the barang. They just represent the manufacturer ataupun the producer. Okay, so when we talk about agents, typically you can also see that this is dia punya brokers. So brokers would mean that in certain geographical areas ataupun in certain countries that the manufacturer is not not familiar with, they can actually take a local punya broker. The broker will familiarize themselves with the manufacturer punya goods, and then they will try to sell them in dia punya markets. Tetapi dia tidak membeli barang tu. They do not take title. Dia tidak membeli dan own barang tu. Tidak. Okay, so this is agent. Then we have facilitators, right? So for facilitators, these are companies that dia tolong sahaja, dia membantu di dalam distribution punya proses. Dia tidak akan membeli barang tu, they will also not own the item, dan juga dia tak negotiate on behalf of the producer. So negotiate pun tak ada, beli barang stok, simpan as stok pun tak ada. Okay, dia hanya facilitate saja. That's why they are known as facilitators. So facilitators ni dia mungkin ada servis yang boleh membantu that distribution punya process. Okay, so this can be any sort of company ranging from transportation punya company to banks untuk bagi financial services, untuk warehouse di mana manufacturer tu boleh simpan barang dia. And dia memberikan services warehousing, dia memberikan, so basically they give them the space lah. Dia memberikan service transportation macam pemandu lorry, logistics punya company, ataupun airline dan juga train services. Okay, so they just facilitate, they help to move the goods around, and they might actually also give financial punya services. So that is known as facilitator, right? So these are different roles lah. So you're starting to see, oh, okay, dalam distribution channel ni dia memang ada role-role yang berbeza. Okay, so we go on to try to understand apakah or what are the very important punya roles that dia punya members of their punya marketing channel actually need to carry out. So actually there are a lot of things that need to be done. When we make the product and then we're trying to distribute it to their punya consumers, it can actually be a simple process or it can also be quite a complex process with many layers. So therefore you akan nampak that dia punya functionality sebenarnya banyak. There are a lot of functions here. And you can see that one of the important functions here is that they need to gather information about all the different players dalam dia punya marketing environment. Of course, understanding the consumer is one of the key functionality. So they need to be able to gather information about the consumer, and that information is then fed through their punya distribution punya line. But at the same time, you can see that information from competitor never hurts. Okay, it doesn't hurt anybody to know more about kita punya competitors. Or any key punya actors that actually can influence their punya distribution of their punya goods or products. Okay, and then you can also see that for certain type of marketing channel punya members, they do have a role to play in terms of marketing communication. Right? So especially if you're looking at this level, merchant, where kita ada wholesaler dan juga retailer, especially retailer, they actually need to play their role to actually buat marketing communications baru dia punya goods akan jalan. Alright, so you can see that some types they memang kena disseminate communications, and they will hope that people will actually buy. Okay, we can also see that it is also important that some actually go out and negotiate untuk penjualan barang tu. So you can already guess that this one most likely adalah untuk agent, where they directly negotiate on the behalf of their punya manufacturer, and then from there you will see that they will agree what is it that they actually want to sell at what price. Okay, so the thing is that when we have different members in the marketing channel, some of these members actually need to spend some amount of money. So to be a distributor or intermediary, they actually do take on some risks. Okay, they do take on some risks because for a marketing channel punya member ataupun for intermediary, you will see that some of them need to buy stock. Okay, so once they buy stock, they acquire the title. What happens if they can't sell the item? Right, they give back. It doesn't work that way. So they do assume some risk by setting up their punya company, and then after that being a retailer or a wholesaler that actually carries those products. So that means that the intermediaries are legitimate business within their punya marketing channel, and all of them also need to manage their punya funds well to make sure that dia boleh carry that item dalam dia punya inventory. So that choice of the inventory is really up to them, especially kalau kita adalah wholesaler, and we understand that for a wholesaler they can actually buy a collection of different brands. So here the wholesaler then needs to decide brand apa yang dia nak beli. What is the composition of the different brands that they actually want to buy and keep dalam dia punya inventories, because there's always a risk that dia dah beli semua barang ni dan tak boleh jual. Right? So companies in the middle, the intermediaries, do actually take on some risks that the manufacturers actually do not. Right? So it's up to them to actually go out and manage their punya business as a intermediary. Okay, so you will see that to move goods to consumers, we actually do need different players, and different players actually do have multiple roles to actually play. And it is a legitimate punya business where you will see that the businesses involved will then negotiate, and they will build a relationship over time to decide which are the brands that they will support, which are the brands that are lucrative, win-win punya situation for both their punya manufacturer dan juga dia punya intermediaries. Okay, so from here I hope that you can already see channel ni actually ada banyak function. Right, channel ni ada banyak function, and to actually distribute kita punya goods ataupun distribute kita punya products, it actually costs quite a bit of money. Right, it actually costs quite a bit of money. Bila kita nak distribute tu, kita nak move our goods around and so on, requires financing. And I hope you can also see that kalau kita ada intermediary that's actually specialized, that's actually a lot better. So that means that they learn that particular sector of business so well that they know that these are the items that can sell, that will appeal to the target market that we want to sell to, and these items maybe not. So when they specialize, they become better and better in that particular sector. They know the ins and outs of the sector. They know what their consumers or their customers want, and that is typically something that we enjoy dengan specialization. And the reason why I'm bringing up specialization ialah bila kita nak pilih kita punya what do you call that, intermediaries, ataupun basically we are partnering in a relationship, we will also look whether that company actually has experience dalam that particular sector or not, to actually carry the goods that we want to sell. Right? And you also see that untuk dia punya key functionalities that kita tengok dekat sini, right, the key functionalities dekat sini can actually be shifted around among channel members. Okay, so for example, we take for granted that when we actually manufacture a product, therefore my manufacturing company is responsible for marketing communications. We take for granted. But you can see that if I'm a retailer, that responsibility then falls on me. Sebab I dah beli barang tu, simpan dalam stok, I nak jual barang tu. So kalau I nak jual barang tu, definitely I have to also get involved in marketing communications to appeal to the local target market that I'm actually selling to. So therefore, the functionality of marketing communication doesn't only fall kepada manufacturer ataupun pembuat barang tu, tetapi it actually can be shifted around among channel members. Okay, so that marketing communication is only one example. We can also have different examples for different things, like for example, the dissemination of information and so on and so forth. Okay, so now that we know there are different channel functions and intermediaries might actually play different roles, we want to try to understand the flow of activity. And here there is three. One is forward, the other one is backward, and the third one is both forward and backward. And want to try to break it down in a picture so that it's actually easy to understand. Okay, so we break it down into a diagram to see which ones are the forward moving one, so the arrow goes towards your right hand side, but we also have the backward forward flowing one, where you can actually see the arrow actually goes to the back, And then we have the arrows that actually move both forward and also backwards. Okay, so if you're looking at physical flow, excuse me, if you're looking at dia punya physical punya flow, you will see that for dia punya physical punya flow, it will be that the goods will actually flow from dia punya manufacturer, from dia punya supplier, sorry, kepada dia punya manufacturer. And then from the manufacturer, it will then continue to flow until it reaches the customers. So in this sense, you'll see that this is very clearly without doubt, this is the forward flow. So I mean somebody bought, and then after that, dia akan sampai kepada customer, forward flow, right? Then kita juga ada, for example, the backward flow, where this one, to actually understand this, we look at their punya flow of payment. Because remember that when we talk about marketing, we are exchanging kita punya duit for something that satisfies kita punya need ataupun kita punya wants, right? So that product will satisfy our need or want. So if physical flow is dia punya product go to dia punya customer, then the exchange should be that the customer bagi duit and that duit actually flows back kepada dia punya manufacturer. And to some extent, you'll see that even extends to dia punya supplier atau orang yang ada raw material tu lah, alright? So you see that shows that there is a forward flow for the product and a backward flow for dia punya payment, right? Then we go to the both forward and also backward punya flow. And we want to try to understand in which instances do we actually have forward and also backward punya flow. So we want to find the right scenario for backward and also forward flow. And so happen, it is information punya flow. So for information punya flow, you will see that at every level, there is a forward and backward punya information flow, meaning that if I'm a manufacturer, I would likely need to know if, for example, my supplier still has that raw material that is crucial untuk saya punya production. Okay, and I'll be comforted to actually know if the supplier says that, oh yeah, you know, we still have 10 years worth of this particular mineral that you need to actually make your product A, product B, ataupun product C. We also would like to know things like, oh, can the supplier actually supply us the necessary punya volume of that particular product at that period of time? Boleh ke tak? Oh, boleh. Okay, so the manufacturer very happy. Okay, then for the supplier, what are information that the supplier needs? Supplier will likely need to know, okay, for the products that you make, for certain category of products that you make that require kita punya chemicals, for example, is it selling well? Is this a business that you will continue to be in the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years? Is it a bestseller? Okay, and then if I'm selling to you different types of chemicals that actually make different type of products, then I want to know, you know, roughly which are your best sellers, which are the products that are not selling so well. These are the products that are mature that you're going to phase out, because there are some raw materials that are actually connected to kita punya product that maybe over time they will actually already phase out. So if they phase out, they will not order that material anymore. Okay, so you can see that for this relationship to work, the information flow need to be both ways. So if they want to have suppliers, the manufacturer also have to give the supplier some information. Supplier also need to give the manufacturer some information in regards to whether they can deliver or not. And similarly, at every level, you will also see that information flow ni adalah diperlukan. Sebab what you will see is that for a company, when they have intermediaries dan juga dia ada supplier, so as long they are all functioning, they can actually choose to have a relationship, business relationship with dia punya intermediaries ataupun dia punya supplier. Okay, so for that relationship to flourish and for them to do well, they need information to flow both ways, right? So that is example of, you can look at the other examples yourself, but that is example of how the activity actually flows. Dia ada forward, backward, dan juga both forward and backward. So to understand these flows, we have to understand the scenario in which that flow of activity actually happens. So happen dekat sini kita can actually break it down into physical flow lah, payment flow lah, dan information flow. But in real life, this is probably all done together. So it is a what do you call it? A system, a whole system that actually enables dia punya distribution channel to actually work. Okay. So dekat sini, we can also go on to the channel levels. So channel levels, most of you have learned this many times before. And I also know that most of you have seen this diagram many, many times already. Betul? So if you've seen this diagram many, many times already, can you give me a thumbs up? Saya dah tengok diagram ni beribu kali you. Okay, kalau you ada perasaan macam ni, then you already know that when we talk about channels, we can refer to the fact that businesses choose how many levels they want to have, regardless of whether they are selling things to consumer ataupun selling things to businesses, right? So this one is B2C, business to consumer. This one is B2B. So in B2B, we call this industrial punya marketing channels. Dan untuk B2C, this one is consumer punya marketing channel. And we already know that a company can have 0 level, 1 level, or 2 level of dia punya marketing channels. And 0 level would mean that dia pergi direct kepada consumer. And in this modern time, usually that means that they have some sort of website or some sort of app online where they sell directly kepada consumer terus. Okay. And then if they introduce one layer in between diri dia dan juga consumer, that's known as one level. Or typically if I manufacture Nike shoes, for example, I would sell it to retailers, and retailers will then make it accessible to consumers. Okay. And 2 levels here, you will see that kita mungkin ada syarikat-syarikat yang berlainan size that actually can stock different level of products. For example, kita ada wholesaler dulu, and then that is then followed by dia punya retailer that makes the goods available for consumer. Okay, it's the same logic untuk industrial punya marketing channel, tetapi di sini untuk industrial punya marketing channel, nama dia berubah. Okay, nama dia berubah, and you will see that dia punya collection of dia punya goods mungkin berbeza daripada pemahaman kita bila kita nampak retailer dekat mall dan sebagainya. Okay, so it changes a little bit, and it also changes based on dia punya different industry. So different industry will have different ways of doing business that appeals to dia punya industrial customer punya base. Okay, so this one you all know very well. Okay, where dekat sini mungkin you akan, when I'm talking about this, because it's so familiar, you akan multitask, you akan garu-garu muka you akan garu-garu your kucing and so on, because you've heard of this so many times before. So the last part of this channel levels here lah, I just want to tell you about the reverse flow punya channel. So for the reverse flow channel, while we don't have it here in our country, there are some countries like Germany that actually practice this system. Okay, so in Germany, this is known as the FAND system, PHAND. And what they do is that when you actually buy things like bottles, so dia ada what do you call it, plastic punya bottles dan juga dia ada glass punya bottles. They already put a fee on the bottles. Okay, so what you do is that they expect that the consumers will return the bottle. So lepas dia dah minum habis, dia akan simpan semua botol tu, dia ambil balik kepada grocery store, and dia akan return bottle tu, dia dapat balik duit. So for each bottle tu, mungkin they set something like 15 cent ataupun 20 cent ataupun 25 cent, depending on what type of bottles they have. And this is very clearly where before dia jual produk tu, dia dah already decide untuk industri ni, memang dia akan kutip balik semua botol. Okay, so that's why they actually do have this reverse flow punya channel. Reverse flow punya channel, that means that customer bagi balik botol tu. Customer bagi balik botol tu. Okay, right? So that's why dia is in reverse gear. Dia constant. Alright. So here, what they do is, it's common knowledge. The whole country knows what it is. They have this system up is supported by the government and so on. So in every grocery store, dia memang ada sistem ni. So it's already known that kalau you beli botol kaca ataupun botol plastik, if you return, you will actually get back 15 cents per bottle. So kalau you beli satu crate, let's say Hari Raya or whatever lah, their celebration dekat sana Christmas, dia beli satu crate of bottle of Coca-Cola for example, dia boleh pergi balik kepada mesin ni, and this machine really exists. Dia ada mesin macam ni, dia bagi balik satu crate, dia letaklah satu-satu botol dalam dia punya feeder, and then dia akan dapat balik, let's say satu crate tu ada 12, dia kali 15 sen, dia dapat balik duit tu. Okay, so when we actually design kita punya product, actually from the very start, these are decisions that the company can take. For example, dulu, zaman dulu dekat Malaysia, kalau FNN dia akan kutip balik the bottle, but they don't have a system like this. Dia akan kutip balik daripada retailer, and then dia akan ambil botol tu, dia akan cuci, and then after that dia akan guna semula and jual balik as FNN punya drink. Okay, dululah, right? Sekarang you can see that this type of reverse flow channel is not so clear dalam country kita. Country kita tak banyak praktikkan sistem ni, but that doesn't mean that we can't introduce it. So in the future, with other businesses and products, if it is actually suitable, they can actually introduce this reverse flow punya channel where the waste that we have, we can actually take back, and some of the waste is actually kita tahu that some of our waste is actually berharga. Macam barang elektronik, we actually send back kita punya barang elektronik because we know that there are components dalam sana that actually berharga. So why not untuk kita punya laptop, for example, laptop kita dalam circuit tu dia ada emas. Very small level of emas lah, okay. It's not as if I can kutip-kutip and make earring, tak ada lah. It's very low levels of emas. So there is actually people who will actually tear apart electronics untuk dapat komponen-komponen macam ni. So rather than making it a system where dia bukan formalize, kenapa tidak kita formalize dia punya system supaya that kita akan dapat dia punya reverse flow of channel, and we can harvest back the components that are actually berguna. Okay, so that's something that we can think about lah when we think about dia punya reverse flow of dia punya channel. Okay, what happens to the barang-barang at the end of dia punya lifespan? Okay, and then you can also look here that when we talk about dia punya distribution, there are many businesses, as you know, that actually use multi-channel punya distribution. So when we talk about multi-channel punya distribution, we can already easily understand that. That means that we utilize more than one marketing channels untuk sampai kepada customer segment. Okay, so untuk customer segment ni, apa yang penting ialah kita kena faham apakah tabiat membeli customer tersebut. Bila dia beli barang ni, ke manakah dia pergi? Apakah cara-cara yang dia gunakan untuk membeli? Then we design dia punya distribution channel to actually overlap dengan cara customer tu membeli. Okay, and you can also see that bila kita introduce multiple channel punya distribution, it will actually give us lebih market coverage. Okay, so then we can cover more areas when it comes to distributing kita punya goods. And you will also see that because kita ada menggunakan cara-cara distribution yang berlainan, it also gives companies an option of using customized punya selling option. So that means that we customize kita punya selling option kepada apa target market tu perlukan. So if it makes sense to kita punya target market, then we try to meet dia punya so-called dia punya demand by giving them a distribution punya method that's actually convenient to them. Kita nak cuba fit dalam hidup dia. So if we can find a way to actually fit dalam hidup dia dengan cost yang rendah, then you will see that we actually will have a lot of benefits in terms of how many people will actually buy from us. So you can imagine dekat sini if you want to buy something and it's a hassle for you to get that barang, that means you have to travel a very long journey to get that barang. Sometimes you will just put off your decision and say, tak payahlah, susah sangat nak beli barang ni, I pun tak nak beli. Right? So you see that what companies are trying to do, dia memang nak fit dalam target market dia punya hidup supaya senang sangat target market dia memilih brand dia dan terus membeli barang dia. Okay, but the thing is, when we use multi-channel punya distribution, kita ada more than one channel kan. Kita kena manage channel ni, right? We have to manage this channel. And what will happen is that you will actually see that the more channels you have, the more likelihood untuk conflict dan juga issue. So basically drama, all right? The more different types of channels you have, you might be actually dealing with different companies, and different companies have different strengths, different weaknesses, different way of doing things. So you might actually see that with increased number of channels, there is also a likelihood for increased amount of conflict and issues that need to be solved by the manufacturer punya company. All right? Okay. So when we are deciding, how many channels we want, who are channels, and so on and so forth, we can actually decide based on what is the objective and also what is the constraint. So that means that the manufacturer has to know, what is it that they actually want to do. Okay, what is it that they actually want to do? And that will be broken down into what sort of service they want to give. Can they afford to do that? Can the companies that are working with them actually give that level of support? And who are the customers they actually want to reach? So whether we like it or not, from the marketing strategy punya chapter that we talk about STP, segmentation, targeting, positioning, turns out the targeting part and the positioning part is something that's actually echoes through the entire 4Ps punya choice. So our 4Ps punya choice goes back to kita punya STP punya exercise, where you can see that when kita pilih kita punya channel pun, kita pilih what makes sense to our customers. Okay? What makes sense to our customers? Our positioning will determine what is the level of service yang kita nak bagi. And then we will try to balance that out with the amount of money that we have to spend, the cost, and also dia punya support level. Alright? So what the company does now will actually influence what sort of channel they choose, right? What sort of things that the company actually buys will actually influence what do you call that? Dia punya distribution channel that dia pilih, right? So if let's say a company actually sells very bulky punya products, so I'm talking about products that no one human being can live, right? This is not your everyday punya products dekat grocery store. I'm talking about maybe equipment ke, something that's heavy and bulky, or maybe they jual jentera ke, alright? So if you have very bulky punya products, you can already guess that when you ship bulky punya products ataupun you try to move bulky products around, it will actually cost quite a lot of money. And you have to figure out how you want to ship these bulky punya items, right? So when we have bulky punya products, you will see that dia punya channel management decision will then go back to, does it make more sense for us to just produce in that particular market? Because we will expect that for us to ship one jentera will take so much effort. So do we actually want to produce closer to kita punya source of kita punya business? That means we go closer to kita punya customer. Ataupun kita ada company that actually put the whole jentera together in that local company, so we only send the parts. So those are decisions that the manufacturer actually need to decide. And when they actually decide, it will go back to dia jual jenis produk apa. Okay, and you can see that this will actually differ from consumer products to bulky products to industrial punya products, and also maybe service punya products, right? And so each industry, you'll see that they will have different type of criteria and different ways of doing things within that particular punya industry. And how do they manage then that relationship between that particular company and how they ship dia punya barang-barang, ataupun in this case, how do they manage their punya service, right? So the types of the sector that they're actually in they still have to think about it, because some products, especially bulky products or industrial products, can appear to be or pose some constraints that they will have to balance out with their objectives. So that means that even though maybe their objective is actually to conquer the whole market, it doesn't necessarily mean they can just snap their fingers and do it. They still have to break down very carefully macam mana kita nak buat benda ni. Okay, because the products that they sell can sometimes be constraints that they have to think about. Okay, okay. I can see now that it is 3:30 and I would like to stop the class here and we can actually continue in the next class. If you're agreeable, can you give me a thumbs up? Okay, thank you very much, Firdaus. All right. So let's continue in the next class to actually go through the slides. For your information, we are almost done with the syllabus already. Kita hanya tinggal, after this chapter, kita hanya tinggal satu lagi sahaja. Then we actually finish the syllabus. So this week, we can finish off this distribution punya channel. And then you go for your cuti. And then after your cuti, we'll cover one more chapter. And then you can start preparing untuk you punya tests. And you can also start working on you punya marketing punya plan. Alright? Okay. So please make sure that you put in you punya attendance untuk hari ini. And I will see you in the next class. Bye-bye. See you.
You, Doctor.
Bye.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you, madam.
Right, see you.
Thank you, madam.
Bye.
Bye, madam.
Bye,
Thank you,
bye.
madam.
Okay, bye.